Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney. I want to delve into, something I'm passionate about, but a lot of people are, because there are a lot of business owners out there who have been, sportsmen, sportswomen. They've grown up playing a multitude of sports, and in Australia, we are a very sporting country, and I know that we're not alone in that, but it's very common to take a lot of our time, commitment, developing skills in a particular sport. But at the end of that sporting career, what do we do with what we've learned? Can we apply that to our business, to our employment? There is a way that we can do that, but why do so many people miss the opportunity? So our guest today, Pete Moore, who's the founder of Integrity Square, has helped many businesses take those skills and apply them into, thriving businesses, growing businesses, but he's helped them create over $1.5 billion in transactions in what we call the halo sector. And I'll get Pete to explain what we mean by the halo sector. We're not talking about the online gaming. We're talking about a real scenario here. He's also worked with a lot of boutique fitness studios to major wellness brands. He's the author of the Time to Win Again, which is a book that's got some really actionable takeaways in there and some key strategies for growing your business and navigating change. And he's also the host of the Halo Talks podcast with an audience of over 8,000 professionals tuning in to hear what he has to say about strategy, investment, innovation, and particularly around health and wellness. And we're going to probably find out a bit more what Pete says on the view of what we mean by wellness. But Pete, welcome to the Business Behind Your Business podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Paul. And just for complete disclosure, I took a Kentucky tour back 30 years ago when I was in college. So I could do Waltzing Matilda with the best of them. And I have a near and dear to my heart for all Aussies that I've traveled with in the past. And I hope to get down under at some point soon. So thanks for having me and for your audience to listen in here. Since 1999, I've been working either as an investor, as a banker, or an advisor to the health and fitness industry. And sometimes we would call that the health and wellness industry. And about 10 years ago, I said, this word wellness, I've got a problem with it. And I can't really figure out what my problem with the word is. So I Googled it and I found out that the word wellness was started by a doctor named Halbert Dunn at the Mayo Clinic back in the 1950s. And he was a biostatistician looking at all the data, seeing Americans getting sick, and saying, hey, I've got to come up with a movement and I have to come up with the opposite of illness. So that's how he came up with the word wellness, the antonym of illness. To me, that says you're not sick, which in this day and age of science, inspiration, motivation, getting people together as a community and making things happen, we need a better term for that. So I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning one morning and it just hit me that the word should be HALO. And that HALO acronym, which stands for Health, Active Lifestyle, Outdoors, is really an all-encompassing kind of aspirational way we create the halo effect. Anyone that gets into the health club industry, the fitness industry, it changes their life. People that get on diets or go on, get into certain groups that are peer-to-peer, that are either cycling or they're going hiking, that changes the parameters of what a community could do and push people to not just be sick, but to really optimize who they are. So what we've done is we've kind of gone all in on the term halo to basically say, if you're a connected fitness company, if you're a bricks and mortar, if you're a better for you food company, if you're a supplement company, if you make software that powers the space, if you're a coach, if you're servicing youth sports performance, if you are a manufacturer of kayaks or baseball bats or rugby shoes that have the word halo on the bottom of them, you are a part of my halo sector. So I hope that the people that are in this sector drop the word wellness, because you're not just in business to try and make sure people don't get sick. We're here to optimize talent, optimize communities, and eradicate some of these diseases that are all self-inflicted. The U.S. has a huge problem with obesity. And it's not just an Ozempic or a shot with a GLP that's going to change somebody. You got to change how your attitude and your behavior is. So I'm hoping that Halo becomes a term where people say, hey, I'm part of the Halo sector and I'm making a difference. So long-winded answer to your short question.
Absolutely. Look, a couple of key things there that you've touched on that which really excite me is one, moving away from, I guess, a very limiting phrase in terms of wellness, because I think there's people look at that term and they put a lot of limits on what it actually means. But I love the way that Halo, you've described Halo as not just the fitness training, the sports coaching. You've actually looked at a whole, I guess, taking it beyond that in terms of whatever you can do to facilitate people being involved in an active lifestyle, getting outdoors, that community,
exactly.
Fit, better lifestyle, better health, going beyond just what I think a lot of us think, well, hang on, I've played sport, let's go into sports fitness or sports management or coaching. You've taken that a lot further, and I think there's a lot more, I guess, impact by looking at it as a bigger picture.
Yeah, you kind of think of it as like an ecosystem. So, if I'm a member of a health club in New York, I'm also probably a member, or I'm interested in workout recovery equipment, or I might want to go to a spa, or I might want to go to a live sporting event. And what hasn't happened in the U.S. market, and I don't think it really has happened globally, is that if you're a business owner and Paul, you've got a sports performance, bricks and mortar location, maybe you have 10 of them, and I have a bricks and mortar location that's spas. Well, we're not competing with each other. Why aren't we sharing members and pushing people together as a cooperative? Why aren't we doing a deal together where on your front of your door of, your sports performance, we don't have a Dasani or a Smart Water logo, just like you brand arenas and stadiums? Like, why shouldn't we have these other groups that are trying to provide food and beverages into our sector? Why aren't they aligned with us and sponsoring our events and doing programming with us? So what I'm trying to do is expand the ecosystem to the point where everyone knows that, hey, if there is a consumer that is an evangelist and wants to live a healthy lifestyle, let's just kind of bring them around the wheel and let's keep the wheel expanding. And then we all win. And then investors say, hey, I want to invest in the Halo sector because that's where people make money and that's where the tailwinds are and that's where the growth is. And the key to this whole ecosystem is we got to figure out a way for people to make money, okay? Because industries that have low profit margins and have troubled unit economics is not a place long-term where people go to put capital. So what I'm trying to do is be in kind of like this middle of, ground zero, if you will, or kind of like the clearinghouse for companies, executives, ideas, education, and transactions. And if I can put those together, then entrepreneurs that deserve capital to grow and have businesses that can serve more people will have the ability to do that. So that's kind of like my bigger mission of what you're saying, expand the ecosystem and let's not leave anyone out. And that could start as a kid who's 6 years old that, wants to take a training class and be, an elite baseball player. Okay, well, there's a coach there, but that one coach, that might not be a sustainable business. So maybe that coach should have a sports performance entity that serves all different sports and not just focusing on baseball or focusing on one sport, but trying to figure out what's the largest opportunity. And sports performance has been a place where people have not made a lot of money in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the sports and fitness coaches, trainers that I've dealt with or know from experience have found it very hard to make a profitable business and one that's scalable. And they've got a very limited, I guess, market for who they service. The other thing that I've traditionally seen is a lot of competition and, I guess, fear that they're going to lose business by sharing their customer with another coach or another service provider. But what you're describing is more of a, when we collaborate and work together, we actually increase the available revenue because we're working as a team. We're creating an abundance, not a scarcity, and that works better for everybody.
Yeah. Well, to give you a couple of stories and anecdotes to kind of help people think bigger about your business, okay? I was working with a club chain, and they said, a lot of our members are playing pickleball. That's a big deal in the US right now. I don't know if it is in Australia.
Well, it's starting to gain momentum. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to see pickleball all over the place. Okay. And my client's like, look, I don't have the square footage to put in a pickleball court inside of my club. I'm like, well, let me tell you what you do have. You have the ability to run group exercise programs to enhance somebody's pickleball game, okay, with stretching and conditioning and doing certain, workouts and developing certain muscles. And what you also have the ability to do, if you're an expert in workouts, you have to be an expert in workout recovery, okay? So what I've done just there is I've created 2 classes per day times 7 days a week of 14 classes, 14 hours of programming, where it's pickleball, pre-workout, pre-game, and pickleball post-recovery, all right? And then what I do is I say, you know what? I don't need my own pickleball court because all these municipalities and cities and towns are building pickleball courts. But what I do need is I need 2 people to be the pickleball ambassadors that are in our club that run our pickleball club team, right? And if you come in and I ask you, hey, Paul, what are you looking to achieve? I'm looking to lose 20 pounds. I'm looking to play pickleball, daily. I want to be part of a social group. I want to make sure I don't get hurt. Okay. You don't have to be a pickleball expert in exercise. You have to say, okay, I understand functional training. I understand lifting weights. I understand musculoskeletal MSK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop a program for this baseline. And that baseline of pickleball is also the baseline for padel, which is also the baseline for tennis, which is also the baseline for other racket sports, right? So now I took my business as a coach to say, hey, I'm a pickleball expert. Well, maybe that's not big enough for the full day. But if I can say I'm an expert and authority on all racket sports, and I also have teams and cohorts and groups that you can become a part of, that's interesting. There's some guys in New York that set up a health club in New York called the Athletic Clubs. And instead of having you become a member of a health club, these guys are Australian, by the way, and they missed playing rugby. So what they did was you join a squad, okay? You don't join the club because the club, we could go do workouts inside, outside at different locations. And they set up a squad. The mentality of that, as I'm joining a squad, is not me joining a physical location. I just built a relationship and joined a community. If I join a community, it's much harder to leave the community than it is to leave a physical location. So those are some of the things where you got to think about your business from a different direction in order to expand what you really can do for people.
Mm. Look, Pete, I think we've talked about how a lot of people are engaged with sport and a lot of them develop skills and talents. Would it seem to be that a lot of people forget the skills and talents and that they've learnt from playing competitive sport when they transfer it to business? Because what you've just described is very similar to how you would approach at an elite level for sport. But a lot of the owners that I've seen try to take their sporting skills and transfer that to a business seem to have forgotten all the skills they learnt on the sporting field.
Well, I think, and unfortunately, I think when people stop playing their sport, they think that their athletic career is over, right? The reality is that business is a sport. And I started using this term that you are a business athlete. You're an executive and you are running now a unit economic game. If you are a bricks and mortar player, you're running a team, right? And people sometimes forget about what made a successful team, right? And they build an org chart and they forget that the org chart, if I've got 11 people on a soccer field and I used to play goalie, I'm the CEO of the company. I'm the goalie. If you're a business owner, you are the CEO and you are the goalie. And the goalie has visibility of the entire field. But the CEO is not the one that's going to score. The CEO is going to make sure we don't lose. That's what my mother used to always tell me. I said, I get to use my hands. There's no reason why we should lose. And I'm going to make sure that we don't lose. And I'm going to hire people. And I'm going to bring in my strikers and my left wing and my right wing and my midfielders. And they're going to be responsible for the offensive playbook. And I'm going to be responsible for the defense. And my defense is my controller, is my head of legal or my lawyer, is my chief operations officer, and is my head of HR. And after this podcast launches, people say I'm the director of human resources. Well, Paul, you and I are athletes. I've never considered myself a human resource. Okay. So in my book, I say, if you're head of human resources, please change your title. Your title should be, I'm the head or director of player personnel. All right. That's one of the things to think about your team. And then what I used to do before COVID, I used to do a lot of seminars. And I'd go up to these health club owners and I say, what constitutes a win today? How do you know how does anybody know if we won? Okay. And they would say, oh, we sell a certain number of memberships, so we know that that's like our quota. And what I created was a scorecard to say, if we have a certain amount of people in the class, if we get a certain amount of reviews, if, we sell a certain amount of whatever it is, that's either a win or a loss. Okay. So every day you can say, hey, we won yesterday or we lost yesterday. If you want to participate in business, you're going to go bankrupt. This is not a participatory sport, right? This is cutthroat. So one of the things is player personnel. 2 is like my org chart is my team. Okay. And I tell people, you got to get people uniforms. Okay. So I'll go into a health club sometimes and I'll see someone has on the back, it says trainer or it says, it says nothing. Okay. I'm like, dude, when you played a sport, when you played rugby, right? And you had a jersey, when you put that jersey on, how did you feel? How'd you feel?
Yeah. You're part of a team. You know what your role is in that team because generally the number of the jersey represents what position you're playing. So you know your role and you're very switched into it. But you're also, I think the other thing is you know what other players' roles are in that team as well.
Yeah. And what also you do is when somebody gives you that jersey and I hire you and I say, you say you want to leave, you get fired or you resigned or something, you know what I'm going to do? I'm taking your jersey back because you're not on my team anymore. So I told these Gold's Gyms, hey, get people football jerseys, put their name on the back. And then if they leave the club, charge them for the jersey or get it back from them, unembroider their name on the back and put the new guy's name on the back, their last name, right? And run a fitness studio as if it's like an extension of the sports team that they used to play on. And also, if you want to have a team, it might be a good idea to hire people that actually played on a team, right? If you want to, hire someone that looks like you want your brand to look, okay? You better be able to put a shirt on that makes somebody who comes in say, I want to be like that person. Like that woman's got her act together. And if you've played Division 1 or Division 2 or Division 3 or on a club team, in Australia, and you were there for 4 years, and you stayed on that team for 4 years, okay, I know a couple things. I know you got grit, right? I know people like you, right? You probably wouldn't be on the team. I know that you've got discipline, right? I know that you wake up in the morning and you get to team meetings on time, right? So I've already self-selected athletes to be part of my company, right? And athletes want to be athletes forever. I just went to a cycling class and I won today, and I feel like, hey, I'm still an athlete, okay? The other thing that I'll mention, and then we can move on, is that in every sport, people take timeouts, okay? And usually you take a timeout because something has gone wrong, something is about to go wrong, or there's an injury, okay? In business, no one takes timeouts, ever. I go to a health club operator and I'll say, hey, that locker room, like you should definitely change the tiles in there and you got to refurbish it. It's like, I'm thinking about doing that in January. Like, bro, it's June right now. Like, why don't you close the locker room? Let's fix it, right? Like you would in a game, and let's move on and like make changes. They got a salesperson. The salesperson, they're not doing that well. Take a timeout, fix the script, rewrite the playbook, and take a timeout and fix something. Like people run their business and they let bad things happen, and then they don't want to change the software. Software is not working. We're going to change the software in September. When it's a little lighter traffic. Change the software now. Take a timeout, okay? And then the last thing I would say is that when I used to play soccer and I used to play flag football, we knew everything about the other team, everything, all right? But you're in business, and I go to operators and I say, who do you compete with? And they say, I think there's a Snap Fitness down the block. I'm pretty sure there's an Equinox. I think there's a Fitness First here. What do you mean you think? Like, I want to know what their pricing is. I want to know the type of people and athletes they have there. I want to know the results people get. I want to know what their rating is on Yelp or LinkedIn or what have you. I want to know every single thing I can about the competition because I want to beat them. And I got to figure out a playbook and a strategy to beat them. And I feel like a lot of people don't do the same work that you would do preparing for a game that you do preparing for business. A great example would be, if you and I were playing a rugby game, right? Would you and I show up 3 minutes before a Zoom call? Hell no, dude. We show up like an hour, 2 hours before. We'd like get together, we'd stretch, we'd strategize, we'd figure out what we want to get out of it. We'd have a script set up. We'd have our shit together, man. We'd be like, yo, let's go do this call and let's go win the call. Let's go win the Zoom call, right? So a lot of people go into a Zoom call. We know what our objectives are here today is to get people to think like you're still an athlete, act like it, and don't go and have a 500 or 8-8 season. Go out and like make the playoffs, get into the championship. And I think if more and more people believe that they are the owners of a sports team and your team is your business, you're going to be more successful because you're going to exert the same amount of energy and put that pressure on yourself. And then the last thing I'll say, do you watch tennis at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not as much as I used to. I used to really enjoy, I guess, the competitive nature of it. But I know that, if you don't prepare for it, the tennis, you can't just walk onto the court and just expect to be hitting winners all the time.
Yeah. And you're going to lose 45% of the points that you take, as Federer said. But the thing I'll leave with here on this segment is at the U.S. Open on the main court in Flushing, New York, when somebody goes onto the main court, there's a plaque. And the plaque says, from Billie Jean King, pressure is a privilege. So if you went into your business and say, hey, I'm going out to compete today. I'm going out to win today. What do I want to accomplish and what constitutes a win? And know that it's not going to be easy, right? People sometimes take hits and they say, oh, I'm a victim. You're no victim, okay? You're going into a sport and someone's winning or losing. So you might as well try and win and gear up and play your best game. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Look, Pete, I think you've outlined a lot of the strategies. We don't have time to go into the strategies in detail today, but in the book, Time to Win Again, I think you've set out some playbooks and structure to how people should approach their business like a sporting team. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the book basically was inspired by watching a documentary on ESPN of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls and their dynasty, while I was working on 4 bankruptcy deals of health club chains that were basically closed by the government for a period of time. And I basically went back to my roots of being an athlete and said, when these companies reemerge, and it's called Time to Win Again, like we're going to win again, but how are we going to win again? Well, let's think about winning like we used to win back in high school and back in college and back in team sports. And we came up with 52 takeaways. And some of those are, you got to pay for talent. I see great software companies that have amazing software and don't spend money on salespeople, right? And business development. And they say, oh, the software is going to sell itself. Well, has a midfielder scored a goal recently in the English Premier League? No, hardly ever, right? The defensemen in hockey, yeah, they may get a couple of shots in, right? But it's you guys in front of the net are the ones that are putting the puck in the net, right? As an analogy. So you got to pay for talent. The other thing you have to do is you got to take timeouts like we talked about. Then what you also have to do is you have to understand the competition and how they're going to market and then be able to counter that. So it's almost like in rugby, somebody's bringing it down the flank and you guys have a counterattack. What's your counterattack in business? And do people know what the playbook is, right? And you got to redevelop that playbook and the scripts and how we talk about the business. And then I think everyone's got to have a uniform, right? Because if we're going to play on a team, we got to look like a team. We got to act like a team. And we got to know what the wins and losses are. And then the last thing, and there are 52 of them, but you got to practice, I mean, my business, we spend 30 minutes every Monday basically recapping what we're doing for the week and how the last week was and kind of getting geared up. But if you think about a sports team that plays 3 hours on a Sunday, if we take American football, all right, 500 to 700 hours of people practicing and going through plays and going through sequences and reviewing the tape, and being in the locker room and coming up with different schemes. It might be 700 hours to 3 hours that they play. Imagine you took all day Monday and say, like, we're closed on Monday. not because it's a Chinese restaurant in New York, but because we're practicing and we're going to figure out what we're going to do this week. That would be radical, but it might not be a terrible idea because you'd have the best team on the planet.
Yeah, look, so many good points there. And I think that last one really strikes home is I'm seeing more and more businesses actually close their office to do those team development days. And I think that's a slowly emerging trend, but probably something that we need to embrace a lot more. But so many good points there about how we can think of our business like a sport and use those skills. Look, we've only just touched the surface. There's so much more in there. So I think we encourage people to go and grab a copy of the book, but also the Halo Talks podcast. What sort of topics do you cover on that?
So what we're trying to do is every week we launch a podcast. We're up to 600 podcasts now. We've interviewed people, across the world, several people out of Australia as well. And we're focused on trying to figure out what the special sauce is or what they've done with their business that other businesses in the Halo sector that don't compete directly with them can replicate. So try and figure out how they run their playbook, what some of the key things that they've done, maybe some of like the true struggles that they've had and how they've pivoted the business, and mostly give these entrepreneurs a voice because a lot of them don't get interviewed for podcasts. So if they get a 20 to 30 minute podcast and they tell me their story, then they can use that podcast to either go and raise capital, bring in and recruit employees, have it business partners be able to listen to it or potential strategic partners. So everyone's got to tell their story. And I want to be able to facilitate that. It's a free service, obviously. So I'm not, nobody pays to come on the show, but I want people to know how these things started and also how hard it is to run a business and start a business. So it's mostly entrepreneurs and there's private equity and venture capital firms across the Halo sector, as we like to say.
Yeah. So there's two great resources there, the Halo Talks podcast and Time to Win Again. And of course, some great knowledge, tips, strategy shared with us today by Pete Moore. Pete, what's the best place for people to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, you could go to halotalks.com. There's also on there something called a 2-minute drill, which will give you 2-minute snippets of all the things you would need to think about when you're trying to sell your business. I know we have something called a Halo Academy Fast Break. So the haloacademy.com. And we'll put a QR code, send you a QR code to get a copy of the book. You really enjoy it. And it also can be used as a way, as either an icebreaker or start a meeting and say, flip to a page and let's say, how can we implement this into our business? It's a caricature book. I got ADD and OCD and whatever other letters you give me on an acronym. So it's not a novel. It's bullet points, it's pictures, it's caricatures, and it's meant to just make people better. And if you start thinking like an athlete and never stop thinking like an athlete, you're going to win. So there's no reason not to win until you're done playing.
That's a great way to finish up our conversation today, Pete. Thank you very much for that. And of course, as always, we'll be sharing the links to the resources that Pete shared in the show notes and also on the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website for you to check out and share with another business owner that needs to hear this message as well. Pete, really appreciative of what you shared with us today and your time. Thank you very much.
I like your phrase. I mean, there is a business behind every business. So figure out what yours is, and then you can put a playbook on it. So thanks for what you do. I appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit and send in your burning questions because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.